Good morning. Yesterday I took a very extensive tour of eastern North Carolina where we have had the hurricane damage from Irene, and uh, I guess the mood there is somber, and rightly so. I think I would compare what happened in agriculture to working to get a paycheck, and you get right to the paycheck and you get robbed before you get it in the bank, and that's kind of what's occurred. We had a late crop to begin with because of weather conditions this year, the hot dry weather. So harvest had been delayed, and we were just beginning the harvest. And of course, now Irene has done a tremendous amount of damage to agriculture in eastern North Carolina. It appears now that the greatest amount of dollar damage will probably be in the tobacco crop. Because of the delayed harvest, much of the crop was in the field, and the damage was much more extensive further inland than I expected to see, quite frankly. Even into Wilson, Nash counties, some in Johnson County, there's a considerable amount of wind damage to the crop. Much of the crop blown down on the ground, leaves blown off, and what is remaining has been shredded pretty badly by the heavy winds, and then of course all the rain on top of it. So we know there's a tremendous amount of damage there. The other crops it remains to be seen. I have seen cotton down, underwater, corn underwater. So this is going to be a significant agricultural event in North Carolina. We did see some agricultural damage, not extensive. Most of the damage appeared to be from isolated tornadoes. We did have some poultry operations impacted from tornadoes, and had some grain bin failures because of isolated tornadoes and wind damage. So there is some infrastructure damage, but that's not the substantial part of the damage. It is crop damage and the lack of income that will affect our farmers in this year. Just to put this in perspective, this is the area that is impacted primarily by the hurricane this year, and it is primarily to the east of Interstate 95. In these areas, I'd just like to give you some figures of the amount of crops that we grow there. Corn, 76% of the corn in the state is grown there, 73% of the tobacco, 75% of the soybeans, 94% of our hog production, 40% of our poultry production as far as chickens, and 84% of the turkeys that we raise in North Carolina. So this, if you were going to say the heart of North Carolina as far as agriculture is concerned, this is it, and this is where the major impact occurred. I heard yesterday from farmers, of course they were very somber, but you know, they still have a little bit of a sense of humor about them. That some of them said, you know, we've had the earthquake, the tornadoes, the hurricane. You know, where are the locusts? So I mean, that's kind of the mood that's down there. So we're going to, as a state, you know, we're going to have to assess, you know, what is this going to mean as far as the long-term viability of agriculture in North Carolina. We've seen these kinds of things happen before. The difference this time, we've got really good commodity prices for the most part, but production costs have also tracked commodity prices, so it's a much riskier game that we play now. The reward can be very, very good if everything goes according to plan, but when you have a disaster like this happen, it also means that you've got much more invested in the crops, and it's going to, you know, it's harder to come out of it. So that's kind of what we see. The loss of power continues to be a very big concern. We have a lot of our tobacco barns that are full to the brim with tobacco, with people trying to save as much as they could, and they're doing the best they can with generators. But you know, when the power gets back on, that will be a big help. The cooling of poultry houses and hog houses is also a big concern. We have heard that there have been some generator failures, and there was the loss of some poultry in this regard. So you know, we're continuing to assess the damage and what the long-term implications will be for North Carolina. We certainly hoped that agriculture would have a banner year this year for North Carolina, with the economy like it is, and agriculture being a $70 billion industry. You know, it certainly would have been good for the state to have a really good agriculture year. It does not appear that that's going to happen now.
You mentioned them being so close to getting a paycheck and then feeling like they're getting robbed. How close were for a lot of these crops and products to getting that paycheck were they?
Well, in the case of the tobacco crop, we were actually beginning to harvest all over the state, and probably no more than about 30% of that crop had been harvested before this hit. Cotton, it was beginning to be the time of year that we were going to start defoliating the cotton and picking cotton. Soybeans are, we're not far off, and about 12% of the corn crop had been harvested at this time. So we had a long ways to go, and the sweet potatoes is a huge crop in North Carolina, and we don't know what the amount of rain that we saw was going to do to the sweet potato crop. Certainly, we had started to dig potatoes. It's going to delay harvest, and sweet potatoes you need to dig at exactly the right time to get the right size and quality. So delays in harvest could mean that we have quality deterioration, and there's always the chance that we have potatoes that will spoil in the ground before we're able to get them out.
Is it too early to tell if it's total loss in certain areas?
There are going to be some crops that will be total losses in some areas, and it's hard. That's hard to define. Tobacco that's blown down on the ground, that's been shredded. I don't know how much salvage value there will be there. I certainly saw some crops that, especially corn crops, that had been blown flat down, and bean crops and cotton crops, and were submerged in water. Water was actually over top of the crops, and when you get into a situation like that, there's not a lot left that can be salvaged. So yes, there are going to be some total losses. Anything from a total loss to a percentage is what we're going to see.
It's obviously devastating for the farmers. How could this impact consumers in North Carolina?
Well, we're a major player in agriculture across the nation. Grain-wise, we're not that huge a player, but and it's going to. I think everything is going to depend on what kind of year we have harvest-wise nationally. We already know that Texas and Oklahoma have been completely decimated by the lack of rainfall and heat. There have been floods in the Midwest. There's a huge demand for grain worldwide now, and when we lose these crops, that means that demand is going to remain high and supply is not going to be there in all cases.
What's the last time we saw something to this damage to this extent in this area?
Well, I think probably everybody was thinking Hurricane Floyd. And there was I had some people yesterday tell me that they had more water, especially rain, than they got during Hurricane Floyd. Now, the widespread devastation is not there with Floyd, especially infrastructure-wise. But crop-wise, this is a very tough time of year to have something like this happen. But you always have to keep that glimmer of hope there. And I heard so many terrible stories yesterday. I heard one gentleman and his wife from Bertie County had been hit by the tornadoes and had gotten their infrastructure back in place, and they had 600 acres of tobacco they had been over at one time, and they said it was the best crop they'd had in probably 7 to 8 years, and it's almost totally devastated. And that's the kind of situations that we're going to see all across eastern North Carolina.
Is there any dollar estimate on the value of all of this?
Right now, there is no way to put a dollar estimate on that damage, and the only way we really will know is when the harvest is complete and we have a good assessment from NASS as to what the figures are for this year. But I look at a crop like tobacco that's a $750 million crop basically, and I look at the damage out there. So you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage just to that one crop. So it's going to be substantial, I'm sure, and we're proud that we got through this situation with no more loss of life than we did, and for the most part, I think the farmers did not sustain tremendous infrastructure damage, which means that there's going to be another year, and that there hasn't been a lot of loss of life with this storm. So we're proud of that and proud of the preparedness that we were able to help provide.
You had mentioned